I remember being in math class in elementary school when the nurse came in and announced that she was gonna start calling us kids one by one so she can measure our height and weight. I remember copying equations from the blackboard, and once she said weight, I literally froze. She left and the teacher went back to writing on the blackboard and I continued being frozen. Eventually I kind of get a hold of myself and I continued copying what the teacher was writing because I was a good student, trying to always please and being a good student. So I went back to copying, but I couldn't really process what I was copying anymore. I wasn't really looking at the lines. I wasn't like absorbing the information. It was just like me scribbling. When you're like writing something and you are writing it, but you're not actually aware of what you're writing, if that makes sense, because you're focused on something else. That word, weight, was terrifying to me back then because I knew that the nurse will know how fat I was and she was gonna tell my mom, and my mom was going to force me to go on a diet immediately. It's not like I didn't know that I was a big girl for my age. I didn't look like other girls. My thighs were bigger, my stomach wasn't as flat, and my face was rounder. But I was terrified of knowing the exact indicator of that, of having proof, sorta, of how fat I was, especially since the nurse was gonna measure every single kid in class and she was gonna see my weight compared to everyone else's, and I was absolutely terrified of that. Even though I saw these differences, they never registered because I never associated any meaning to look different than other girls, except when my mom started teasing me about it. When I was in first, second, and third grade, I used to be a very active girl. I used to sing sometimes in front of the whole school. I used to choreograph dances for us at recess, and then we would perform them in front of the class. I used to do a lot of things that would put me out there and in the center of attention, so that I really loved to perform. But somehow, somewhere along the way in those grades, I don't remember exactly when, it was like gradual along the years, that my mom started remarking more and more on the fact that I was overweight, as she called it. Even though when I look back at myself back then, I don't see an overweight girl. I see just somebody who's, maybe bigger than others, but not something that should be unhealthy or cause a problem. But anyway, in her eyes, I was gigantic and that needed to be fixed. I needed to look like everybody else, because if I didn't look like everybody else, then nobody would want to be my friend. This is how she saw it. So in her mind, she was protecting me, but factually, she was really destroying my self-esteem. On that day, when the nurse came into class, that was a day when I was sort of past this complete self-esteem destruction. I was a completely different person. I wasn't the same bubbly kid anymore. I was very terrified of people looking at me, scrutinizing me. I always walked around with very baggy clothes because I didn't want anybody to see my body and see how fat I was, even though it didn't really seem to help. I even had a speech impediment at one point when the teacher would ask me to read something in front of the whole class, and I wouldn't be able to get out the first word of the sentence. I would like look at the word and I would like I would do this a couple of times before I could talk. It was horrible, and I was spending more and more time alone. I had friends in school, but I rarely wanted to go out and meet them anymore because, again, the way my mom used to comment on my weight, it made me feel and made me believe that everybody sees that I'm a problem, that wherever I will go, people will comment on me. Sometimes she would say things to me like, oh, this person was looking at you because you're so fat. She would interpret the way people behave towards me negatively all the time. And this is what I internalized. And so I was terrified of people, of going out. And so I was spending more and more time alone. But now, after the nurse's announcement, I couldn't run away, I couldn't hide, I couldn't shield myself. I had to face the fact that despite the fact that I was one of the smartest, if not the smartest, kids in my classroom, based on grades, of course, who knows what the parameters of smart is. But despite being the person with the highest grades in class, I was once again not enough because of my weight. To this day, I have no idea how what was supposed to be confidential information became public, but 2 hours after my visit to the nurse's office, everyone knew that I was the fattest kid in class, the fattest girl in class, and everybody had proof of that. For the rest of the day, people looked at me, whispered, gave me judgmental looks, sometimes pitying looks. But to be honest, the only reaction that I feared from was my mother's. I had no idea how she was gonna react, and I was playing scenarios in my head, what she's gonna say, and I was absolutely terrified of her reaction. That day, even though it definitely wasn't the last day that I, got some shit about my weight, is forever etched in my memory because it was the first day when I remember another grown-up, besides my mom, comparing me to other kids and telling me that I fell short or fat. In the years that followed, my isolation became worse and I developed social anxiety. I couldn't go anywhere without overthinking about my thighs, my stomach. I would be hyperfixated on them all the time. If I was sitting on a chair, I would look at my thighs, look at how much space they were taking up on the chair. If we were at a restaurant, I would look at what other people were eating, what they were ordering, and I would compare. I would look at how much they were leaving on the plate compared to me. I couldn't look people in the eye without blushing. I couldn't voice my opinions because I just didn't want people's attention on me. I preferred, to listen than to speak, because if I'm listening, the attention is on the other person, not on me. I would start sweating profusely if I needed to speak and if people's eyes were on me. I was just basically a shell of a person. I was just like there, hoping that I could go back to my room, bury myself in a book, and just go into another world where I didn't have to face anybody. My mom's remarks didn't stop. They actually got even worse, both in frequency and in harshness. And with every comment, she would, like spit on me. Everything she would say, it further created more connections in my mind that as long as I remained fat, I was deemed unworthy. I was unlovable, nobody wanted to be my friend, I was useless, yada, yada, yada. And because I desperately wanted to please her and I also wanted her to shut up, I tried to diet the only way I knew how. I restricted. At first, when I was around 7th grade, I was anorexic for a while, but people quickly caught on to the fact that I wasn't eating, and that became a problem. So I got back to eating, but I also gained the weight that I lost. And then bulimia entered my life, and that stayed with me for 15 years. Through it all, my weight swung in every which direction. But one thing remained the same. How awful I felt about myself, how low my self-esteem was, and the amount of shame that followed me every single day. My entire self-worth was dependent on how I looked, and it seemed that I could never get it right. A couple of weeks ago, I stepped on the scale and saw the biggest number I've ever seen on the scale in my life. Now, to be honest, all those years of conditioning that I spoke about sent a wave of panic through me. But then I stepped off the scale, I took a deep breath, and I looked myself in the eyes in the mirror. And I started smiling because there I was, a healthy, strong woman who's been bulimia-free for months. And I got excited because that number no longer means anything to me or about me. I looked at my body and I started placing my fingers on the fat that wasn't there when I was still purging my food. I looked at my legs and saw my strong thighs that never failed to take me from point A to point B. I looked at my stomach and I saw a strong entity that survived unthinkable abuse. I was, and I am, thankful for all of it just the way it is, because no matter its shape and size, my body was always there for me. I spent the majority of my life in a never-ending battle trying to make my body different, smaller, all for the sake of somebody else's acceptance. Someone who I have come to learn as I grew up didn't have the capacity to accept anything. But despite how much my mother hurt me, I now understand that she herself was battling with the same demons that she unleashed on me. Demons that she herself inherited from a society that she desperately wanted to fit into. The difference between her and I is that I refuse to accept those demons as my own. I refuse to be in a society that bullied me into self-hate. I'm just not interested in living my life that way. For years, I thought that isolating myself was the answer. That if I hide, then the demons will not be able to find me, and I wouldn't obsess about my body anymore. But as much as there are ugly sides to our society, there are wonderful parts of it as well, and I wanted to be a part of them. I want to walk next to the amazing people that choose to live in those amazing parts. To do that, I had to stop running and face those messages that were telling me that I'm not enough. I needed to arm myself with tools to fight back so that they never ever again live in my mind and hurt me again. And that's exactly what I did. To be honest, it's a tough and ever-growing fight. But in my opinion, it's worth it if I get to live with peace and love in my own body. I'll show you how I did that in the next video. I'm also going to be hosting a workshop on the 28th of March. It's called At Home in Your Body. It's all about body confidence, how to feel comfortable and confident in your body as it is. It's not about changing your body, it's about accepting it as it is. And we're gonna be talking about all the things that I'm mentioning in these 2 videos, plus a lot of reflection questions. This is not gonna be me just lecturing you guys, it's gonna be us having a conversation and me giving you prompts to think so you can reflect and also use whatever you reflected on in your life after the workshop ends, because I don't want to just be there giving you information and that's it, you're not going to be using it again. I want you to really think about what you want from life. I'm super excited for this workshop and I really hope to see you there. You can find all the information and a link to RSVP in the description. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Have a great day and I'll see you next week. Bye.